more things will begin to get into the cloud. And if I'm to share from my experience in NIBSS, for instance, we started off by moving those non-essential systems, those not core to our business. We started with them. And then over time, as confidence grows and as we begin to see the benefit, then we begin to move more important solutions into cloud. And I see that, really happening more and more going forward. In fact, studies have shown that in the next 5 years, only about 20% of systems is what people will still keep within their own, will keep on-premise. It's like reversing the role now. The estimation right now is that maybe people still keep about 80%, but given the rate of what is going on in the next 5 years, we'll see more and more. Because the advantages of going cloud is very, very clear. We've seen it. We've seen the cost savings. We've seen the agility it gives you. We've seen the way it helps you to really upscale very quickly. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Does anyone want to add to that? Okay, please go ahead.
Yeah.
And can you properly introduce yourself? I missed your first name. I know you're representing.
My name is Oluwa Funke. I represent Uwa Agbonile, the MD of Infoware Limited. Okay. Yeah. So, let me start by saying that Nigeria is cloud ready, and for good or for bad, the recession of 2016-2017 had its impact on businesses. And one of the positive impacts was that businesses were beginning to rethink their IT spending largely, and then they were beginning to look at ways in which they are asking questions as to what technology is right for their business at a reduced cost. Take, for instance, over the last 2 to 3 years, most of our customers that were on-premise had migrated from on-premise to cloud, thereby leveraging on shared resources. And also, if you look at the buying options that are also available by service providers in the industry, 8 in every 10 solutions that we deployed as new deployments opt for the cloud solution because it tends to shift their spending from a huge CapEx to a low OpEx. And then they tend to buy what they need at a time. And as their business begins to scale, they can then increase their capacity. Also, if you look at the Nigerian Stock Exchange, because we are largely on the financial investment side, around 2013, the Nigerian Stock Exchange changed their infrastructure from what it used to be to allow people to invest in real time. So they implemented the fixed technology. The fixed technology largely allowed for any investor to place their trade from any part of the world, and then it goes to the floor of the Nigerian Stock Exchange directly. And given that firms in Nigeria have customers all over the places, and we all are within different time zones. So as at the time our market is opening in Nigeria, somewhere in the US, someone is sleeping. And when we're closing, somewhere in the China, someone is waking up. So how do they assess their portfolio positions in real time such that they can put in the trade, and when the Nigerian exchange market open, the trade can go to the market in real time? The cloud technology has actually allowed that to happen in the last 3 to 5 years, and that has actually been the biggest move we have seen. And as of today, more than 80% of the people that deploy our solution, our enterprise solution users, are actually in our cloud.
Okay, no, that's great. So we are seeing cloud adoption even in the financial sector. I'd like to welcome one of our panelists who has just rejoined us, Mr. Victor Okigbo, the Chief Technical Officer of FBN Quest. We'll give him some time to make it onto the stage. Thank you very much. Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to give you a question almost right away, so I'll ask that you settle in. Do you have a mic over there? We're talking about cloud, the journey to cloud adoption, and where the question is, where are we seeing cloud adoption in Nigeria and why? What do you think is driving that?
Thanks, Funke. Apologies for being late. We stick to the schedule. I'm not going to say more than that.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, cloud adoption in Nigeria, specifically in financial services. What's interesting is, I don't think we're very different from the rest of the world in that regard. Gartner says by 2020, 90% of businesses will be consuming cloud services by 2022. I think Nigeria is well on track to be within those broad parameters. I think we're tracking the industry globally. By and large, with a, $206 billion cloud investment by companies like Amazon, Google, Microsoft, and so on, very unlikely that Nigeria would fall into that category of consumers of these services. We're very good at doing that. Growth will continue, I expect. MainOne will profit, I expect, as will some of your competitors, one expects. The big challenges are around the regulatory space and ensuring compliance with issues like data residency or data sovereignty, challenges around governance and other such. So it's more important for maybe a CTO or a CIO to think through from corporate strategy, connect the dots through to the governance and practices for ensuring the benefits of the company that the company wants to realize, like cost savings, agility, increased efficiency, and see the role that cloud computing plays in that and tap into it, rather than to sort of single-mindedly decide we're going to do a cloud-focused strategy. If you see what I mean, it's more pragmatic than that. Yeah.
No, that's great. So you see 80-90% by 2020 to 2022, but it's not a seamless process or a seamless journey to get there. And I want to talk to perhaps our panelists who are some of the enablers, right? What are the challenges? What are some of the things that you see the roadblocks? Because while we say Nigeria is not different from the rest of the world, Nigeria is different from the rest of the world. I mean, my light blinks here in Lagos at least 3 or 4 times a day in most places, and most parts of the world, my light doesn't blink. So Nigeria is indeed different. And so what are some of the challenges as you work in the space that you see with customers trying to deploy solutions and, yeah.
All right, thank you, everyone. Thanks for having me again. My name is Dio, and I'm the lead consultant for Virtual Nigeria, where we're in the training space. So I'm very happy I'm having this question. And as it were, we're a Red Hat training partner. We're the only ones certified to train and certify people for Red Hat in West Africa. So my experience goes way beyond Nigeria. It covers for the whole of West Africa. Now, I'd like to carry everybody along. I want to be sure that everybody understands what we're saying. Being that I'm from the training background, and our standard in our firm is if you can't explain it to a 5-year-old, then you probably don't know it yourself. So I really want to quickly break what we're saying down for everybody to follow, because during the breakout sessions, I noticed I spoke with some accountants and some HR personnel and the rest of them. So cloud is basically, being able to use certain services remotely. Say, if you needed to have a server in your environment, now somebody provides that server for you somewhere else, and then you can connect to that server and use that server remotely. That's basic. And to put it in a way that people would understand, this cloud are in different tiers. So there's infrastructure as a service on the topic we're talking about. There's software as a service. And majorly what we've been talking about since is more software as a service for you to be able to use these things remotely. Some of our own developers, they rely on infrastructure as a service. So for them to develop certain things, they don't exactly need to deploy those servers and have those heavy, expensive stuff in-house. So if I would throw it to you on a lighter note, if there was a country that had bad leadership, for example, and there's another country that had a good government, you can have GAAS, where you have government as a service, and they can help you, handle your country. You can connect to them remotely, and then they can, some countries in Africa probably need that. So moving back to the question of what are the challenges that we have been facing. First things first is the culture. a lot of people walk into our environment saying, oh, we want to get certified, we want to be able to function properly in the cloud, and then they have gone taking trainings from, non-certified people who can't give them the ability to pass these exams. That's number one. Number two, the guys who make the decisions on what products to use or what training to go for, our culture kind of sits in the way, because the person sitting in that position...
Mr. Adesanya, please, what we'd like you to focus on is not impediments to people taking training from your company. The question we're asking is, for the kind of training you provide and the adoption of more of the Red Hat solutions,
Okay.
what are the impediments that you see those people having? So Red Hat would be expanding more deployments of Linux technology and some of the virtualized technologies would be growing as fast as it is growing globally, but it's not doing that here. So what are some of the impediments you see other than the fact that you want people to take training from your company?
No. So first things first is, in Africa, we didn't grow up, in environments that are really, CLI enabled or Unix environments. Many of us, even in the IT industry, grew up using GUI environments like Windows. So coming into that environment, trying to move to cloud, the challenges that we see are people who do not have the exact, orientation towards cloud. So we need to deal with that first. Also, we're looking at, being able to integrate the new technology that we have in cloud along with what you have already. So if you have certain, you have a data center where you're majorly deployed on a certain platform, you probably want something that can be a part of what you're doing, that you can integrate into what you're doing rather than, throwing away everything. And that's what many of these cloud solutions bring. They bring you platform independence, where you can infuse what you have already with what you're looking to get in the future. So basically, vendor lock-in is one of the major areas that we're having issues as regards people wanting to move into the cloud and having a roadmap in that direction.
All right, no, thank you very much, because I think you hit on two issues. One is the skills and the traditional way of doing things and what people know versus having the relevant skills to adopt some of these newer technologies. And then the second, obviously, is a burden of legacy systems and the need to integrate or migrate and run in a hybrid type environment so you can capture the value or whatever relevance or data that might even reside on those legacy applications. As you may notice, I have been sidelined. Our moderator, who was running a little bit late, Mr. Oluwole Oyeniran, West Africa Systems and Integration Leader for Deloitte. Did I get that right?
For the most part, yes.
Absolutely. Okay. So I'll hand over the baton so that you can continue to drive this panel. And you can ignore me or have me chime in if you want. But the control passes back to you.
It's impossible to ignore you, Funke.
Is that, you're okay with that?
Yeah, sure, I'm fine.
Okay,
Fine with
that's
that.
fine. All right. Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, now, as I am just coming in, I would just like to just touch base to understand where we are. Who has spoken, who hasn't? You have? Mr. Ajao, you haven't said anything? You spoke?
I haven't spoken.
Okay. And you've touched on cybersecurity and the cloud, or just...
We're just starting, really.
Oh, you're just starting?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're talking about challenges for now. Okay, so maybe we'll just hear your own perspective then on what the challenges are.
So,
Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Abiola. I'm representing my ED. I want to apologize for he didn't come because he had an engagement. It was on plan actually, so I'm representing him here. All right. So my thought about the challenges that we have moving to the cloud or moving beyond the on-premise.
Hold it like this. Yes.
Moving beyond the on-premise, I think some of them have been said. One of the things I notice is, one of my understanding here is that a lot of these companies have issues with, we don't have enough skill sets, all right?
a lot of them don't have, the people who make these decisions, they are not open to those ideas of moving to the cloud because within the organization, the skill sets are not there. And then, of course, like already mentioned, there is vendor lock-in. Then beyond that as well, there is a belief that moving to the cloud, you're not going to have all the things you need. So basically, talking about the additional services that you have, especially in the financial sector, we have a situation where there are requirements, quite a big number of requirements, standards that you need to comply with. So there's a fear that going to the cloud or moving into co-location services, they may not be able to have all the things. So for example, you have some certification that is required. Though I understand that some of the tier 3 data centers have those certifications, but they don't have all the things that is required to move to the cloud. However, there's a change, especially in the FSI. A lot of companies, a lot of banks are moving their DR centers to the cloud these days because we build data centers as well for banks. And we have noticed that a lot of them are embracing cloud. So they are moving their DR centers to the cloud. So we have quite a number of them co-locating with MainOne, with other data centers that we have in Nigeria. So those are the things I see as challenges here.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sorry, can I add to that?
Please, go ahead.
Okay. I think when it comes to the challenges of migrating businesses to the cloud, I don't think it's a one-size-fits-all. It all depends on the nature of the business of who you're trying to move with to the cloud. Take, for instance, within our own space, we cater for different stratas of business. We have the very big ones that are part of a bank subsidiaries, and then we have the small to medium ones. So the challenges you face with those big ones are actually much more different from the ones we face with the smaller ones. For the big ones, they understand the technology, they understand the benefits. So the challenges you face with those ones are usually around policies, existing policies that they have within their framework. How do they blend that existing policies into what the cloud technology has to offer? And that's what the challenges they face. But when it now comes to the small and the medium ones, it's more of a cultural thing. And unfortunately, we live in a trust deficit society. So in my engagement with customers in that space, there is the issue of when you move us to the cloud, you would hold us hostage. There is when you move me to the cloud and my data is with you, you'll be selling my data to third party. So there are issues around trust when you're dealing with the small to the medium business owners in terms of moving them to the cloud. And then there's also the knowledge gap. I've had questions like, when it rains, what happens to my data in the cloud? So it all depends on the kind of businesses you're dealing with. For the big ones, they understand the technology. They know where the future of cloud computing is going to. So the kind of challenges we're dealing with is completely different. So on the smaller side, how we tend to address and put their mind to rest and ease the adoption has actually been around, take for instance, for the smaller ones, we tend to give them their data back up on a regular basis so they know that if they decide not to use our solution again today, their data is with them and they can easily move to another platform. Thank you.
Thank you for that. So, Victor, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, man. Let's just pitch it on a couple of points. Outstanding, excellent points have been made already. Just a couple of things that I think we might not have touched on. One of them is cost. One of the impediments that slows down cloud adoption here is the cost issue. Now, paradoxically, this is really weird, but I think SMEs are adopting cloud-based solutions at a faster rate than established typical enterprise computing environments. And the reason, obviously, is that the enterprise is always a bit slower and a bit more cautious, and they'll test and evaluate and fill the paperwork out before they actually make the move. And to a large extent, I really am not entirely convinced that Nigeria is lagging in cloud adoption, especially when you compare it to our overall technology adoption and our internet penetration and internet usage, right? You realize that we are either keeping pace or we're ahead of those other separate trajectories when it comes to cloud adoption for business purposes, for SMEs and for the enterprise. The main sort of points of caution are the ones that have been raised around here, around ownership of the data and so on and so forth, but also around cost. In a volatile exchange rate regime, in a situation where it's extraordinarily difficult to plan and budget accordingly, where most cloud services are costed in dollars, even when they're paid in naira, they're converted, it becomes a bit of a gamble to make a big bet on a cloud computing migration when you're never really sure what might happen to the naira-dollar exchange rate down the line. So this is one of those things that we should always keep in mind. Local providers would be doing the economy a massive service if they could find a way to de-dollarize the cost of cloud computing and make it almost entirely local. By the way, the same infrastructure hassles that we face in Nigeria, the erratic power, the dodgy telecoms, among other things, these are the things that actually hasten and accelerate cloud adoption, where you don't have to build multiple data centers and have redundant power supplies and spend over the odds on things that you have no business spending money on, simply because you want to just keep the lights running, keep the lights on. Cloud computing takes care of that as a hassle. Of course, there's a trade-off. What you gain in stability in that regard, you lose in flexibility and control. But cost is the biggest, one of the headaches that people have to contend with. If you've ever been in a budgeting session where you're looking at IT planning and all that, then you realize that this can be a big hassle. The challenge is that as costs are saved by cloud migration, those savings should not be eroded, right, by depreciation of the naira against the dollar, which might eat into the savings.
Yeah, thanks so much, Victor. So we've heard quite a bit about challenges, obstacles, but I like the angle you've taken in terms of looking at the perspective on how far we've gone. Can we talk a bit more about success stories? I mean, in terms of cloud adoption, what are we actually seeing people signing up on? Why? And how can we extend that to increase cloud adoption overall? Do we have success stories to talk about? I'm sure we do.
Yeah.
Sorry? We did some. Okay, so Mr. Ajao, do you want to?
Yeah, I can speak a bit. And my comment will be on the issue of cost. In my office, I remember a couple of years ago when we needed to take some serious decisions on this, it was cost that we actually used as a basis to move to cloud. But we did the total cost of ownership for a period of 5 years or 4 years, for instance, and it became so clear that if you keep on premise, I mean, we saw both the capex, the depreciation cost, the annual maintenance and all that. We had to do all that to even convince the board to do the investment and the... So when you talk about the cost one, from my own experience, going cloud is actually cheaper. That's what I've experienced. And now, so talking about success stories, I mean, I can begin to talk about so many things we benefited going on cloud, working with MainOne in particular for a number of years now. Initially we had all the usual apprehension. They say, oh, habits die hard. Oh, you're afraid. Oh, there's fear. Oh, if you move these things there, what if anything goes wrong? Oh, cyber attacks will become so easy and all that. The fears were there. But I tell you, looking back now, really, you see clearly that the fears were not justified in any form. I mean, we've been on it for many years now. So talking about success stories, I would say from my own experience, it's been a very good story for us. Cost is better controlled. In fact, the fact that you can now manage your liquidity better, and then your resources can focus on your core business, So normally I tell my people that I pity whoever is trying to take a career in infrastructure management. You better go over to a company like MainOne, not go to user environment the way things are going now, because I mean the direction is very, very clear. Very, very clear. And all the cyber attacks we're worried about, it became clear then that the protection, every protection we want, we can still have, even in the cloud service environment. And where we need to do our penetration tests to be sure that everything is okay, we want to do our continuity of business tests. The adverse impact we thought would happen, did not happen. We still had our flexibility to give ourselves a normal business assurance.
Fantastic. Great to hear that, sir.
Can I add
Do you want to just take some?
I actually want to add to that.
You want to add to that?
Okay, so as an organization and as a service provider, one of the biggest success stories that we've been able to record it by having about 80% of our customer move to the cloud has been in our customer satisfaction rating. So our customer satisfaction rating basically moved from less than 50% to about 86%. And that is because when the report issue, it's easier for us to access their database to query what the issues are on, as compared to if they had the deployment on-premise and we need to send someone to get a backup of the database, the person gets stuck in traffic, and then before you know it, it's like 48 hours before I get the data backup, before I then download it and then begin to script it. The customer is losing patience, the customer is losing money, the customer is losing his own customer satisfaction. But with 80% of our customers being on the cloud, our turnaround time has been that we resolve about 70% of the issue in less than 24 hours, and then we have a 86% customer satisfaction rating.
Okay, great. So, you want to comment on?
All right. So for us in Inlaks, we are privileged to manage the NIBSS platform. That's the National Association of Microfinance Bank Unified IT Infrastructure. So that infrastructure actually is meant to host all the microfinance banks in Nigeria, and we're actually working with MainOne on that project. As of now, we are hosting about 51 microfinance banks on that platform. With that platform, we're able to process all the transactions of these banks. And then not only do we process all these transactions, like end of day transaction and all of that, we're able to do whatever we need to do. At some point in time, we need to do a lot more scale beyond what we're actually using. And we're able to get those supports from MainOne. Then beyond that, for security concerns, we don't have any issue because we did all the tests, vulnerability tests, penetration tests, and everything. And it's working really fine. For those banks, for those microfinance banks, they are better for it right now. They are also able to do their reports, their regulatory reports and everything. It's been done easily now than ever before. So I think we need to adopt the cloud. And as an organization, we have adopted that. In everything we do, we are going cloud, actually. We're no longer looking at doing on-premise services because we also have a super agent license, and our platform is also in the cloud. So
okay, great. Thank you for that success story. Yours?
So, thank you. When I was listening to NIBSS's success story, I remember that we were also a part of the success story when we saw the roadmap that NIBSS was planning to go to cloud. I remember the cost was the major reason why NIBSS went in that direction, and also cost is a major reason why many other companies would adopt cloud. One other major success story we've been able to record with this migration to cloud is that of EcoBank. Coincidentally, it's an environment where they're actually also using MainOne as their connectivity to cloud. And as a multinational company, this move to the cloud now allows different teams from different parts of the continent work on the same projects together. Productivity is higher, and they worry less on all of the issues that infrastructure would have brought up, and they focus on the things that matter. So generally, cloud has really, really helped all our customers to focus on their business rather than thinking of what is underlying below the business.
Thanks. Victor, you want to comment on this?
Yeah, I'll be very brief. I mean, there's some very, let's call them obvious cloud successes, and they're the necessary first steps that almost all of us have taken. I challenge anybody in here, whether you're running an SME or a full-on enterprise, it's almost certain that your messaging infrastructure is cloud-based. It's really, really hard to find someone today whose messaging platform is on premises. And if it's not cloud-based, I can make a bold prediction with mathematical certainty that within 24 months, your messaging infrastructure will be in the cloud. So either O365 or Google or whatever it is, but it'll be cloud-based. So that's one. And there are a couple of other obvious ones that almost everyone's done. And this is a huge success, not just for FBN Quest or for the First Bank Group, but pretty much for across the industry in Nigeria. And in terms of IT driving cloud adoption, it's one of the things that I think has happened very well. Second area where I think is almost obvious is around CRMs and CRM platforms. I mean, at FBN Quest, 100% of customer relationship management solutions are deployed in the cloud on Salesforce. And then there are a couple of others, project management, talent management, where people are going to be sending in applications to be vetted. It's almost all happening on the cloud. And then we'll start getting, at some point, into the more esoteric, slightly more intractable challenges of cloud computing that require some thought, planning, and strategy to deliver. These other ones are almost instant solutions because they've percolated, they've been tried, tested, and it's a very straightforward move to take that step. To move from that sort of software as a service platform to where you're looking at container orchestration with things like Kubernetes or Docker for the developers in the room, where the development team and the IT unit are no longer worrying so hard about integration on a component by component basis, but are now concerned with sort of orchestrating the buckets or the containers of functionality that are sitting in the cloud, including on-premises applications that can be packaged and exposed as APIs on the cloud. That's when things get really interesting. That's where we're going to see some really good technical challenges. But the first few steps, we've taken them, and we've taken them almost effortlessly.
So hearing you all, there's clear value, and there's success, and there's a progression towards the cloud. In fact, any enterprise architecture today that doesn't factor cloud-based microservices is basically building for the past. So in terms of even costs, it could be a negative, it could be a positive, but the point you made earlier about being able to bring these services more in-country would definitely accelerate further adoption across the board. The use cases are clear and they continue to increase every day. Innovation is easier and faster using cloud solutions. You talked about being able to manage costs better. So I think for us, taking all the points from this discussion, and I'm happy you touched on cybersecurity, so I don't have to go into a whole discussion around that. But the bottom line is, you are no less secure on the cloud than you would be anywhere else. And I challenge anyone in this room to prove otherwise, because they're speaking from experience here. So that doesn't have to be a thing, but you also have to be as cautious as you would be anyway, normally in cybersecurity. But I think what we have to take from this is not just asking ourselves if, but when cloud and how, because the if is no longer a question. It's now what use cases, what time frame, what solutions, which partners, and how much more can you bring in country to be able to deliver on this. And I'm sure having a conversation with MainOne is one good starting point to make that happen. So unless there's anything else, I think, do we have questions from the house?
Once again, can we appreciate our panel moderator? Thank you so much, Mr. Oluwale Oyenira. Thank you. All right, so do we have questions? We're going straight after this. We're going straight to the tech panel. Yes. So questions? Questions, please. Do we have anyone? You want to send it to the cloud? Well, it was quite funny. If I put my information on rain will fall. Oh, amazing. Nigerians are blessed. Cloud. Ojonire. Okay, so no questions, right? Okay, so please come. Okay, you already have the mic. Please tell us your name and your cloud. Yeah.
Good evening. My name is Avery Thomas Moore. I work at Axion Venture Lab, which invests in fintech startups around the world, and is also recruiting people to start fintech startups here in Nigeria.
Yes.
My question is, one of the things that I see from the cloud, and a question I have about its expansion here, is the connectivity and the coordination with your online and offline. So I'm just curious as if, especially things like financial services, where people are expecting these kind of instantaneous transactions, you have these lag times. Is that something that you see as kind of a major impediment to kind of helping people adopt the cloud for certain things, because they can't always be so confident?
Yes, sir. The question was directed to you. I didn't hear, but
if I may. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I'm sure you answer. Yeah.
Avery Thomas Moore. That's a humdinger of a question.
Yes.
That's a loaded question. Very powerful.
Yes.
I mean, latency is an issue for cloud computing, and it hasn't gone away.
Yes.
And it will probably not go away. Even cloud gaming is affected by latency as an issue. So for sure, we can put money on the fact that very few financial services institutions here or anywhere are going to migrate their online transaction processing systems to the cloud. It's not going to happen, not anytime soon. However, we have existing challenges around connectivity that introduce a lag in our processing, in our systems. We are increasingly connecting with financial services out of band through the cloud regardless, anyway. And that lag is inherent in the way that we demand services, look for our balances, do transactions, pay bills, and so on. We're all doing them from our mobile phones, via the internet, into the private data centers where we have colocation, or into our cloud-hosted services. So more and more, we're going to see that time difference, that lag eroding as a matter of bandwidth And also, in fact, as we localize those services as a function of the number of hops on the way from start to finish of every single transaction. But by and large, OLTP will not move to the cloud anytime soon. Everything else will move at some point or the other. And just to the point about costs, the issue is not that cloud computing is going to be more expensive. No, we all know that there's savings to be made. It's the difference between a continuously varying sort of infrastructure demands and making quantum leaps in investment every time you want to build up on-premises infrastructure. The issue is that in an environment where the exchange rate situation is volatile or unpredictable, you might lose those savings. It's almost political, but it's to the point where we have to be looking at, we're in a political season. Elections are around the corner, right? We need to be mindful of whom we're voting in, to be sure that we're bringing in decent stewards of the economy to be able to usher in and shepherd in the changes that we're talking about here. Otherwise, they'll undo all the strategy and the plans that we're building up.
Hello, sis? Hello,
did you get the answer?
Did you get? Oh, yes. Yes. Let's appreciate them. Yes. So, I think, okay, please, can you take the mic there? I saw a lady there, please. And then after, this is the last question for this segment, so we can start this tech. Quickly, my brother, please. I can't keep myself.
Hi, good afternoon. My
Good
name is Delphine Onoha, and I'm an independent IT professional. I'm just concerned about local Nigeria cloud providers. Considering the amount of investment that has to go into cloud computing in general, the data centers and all that, for the likes of Amazon, Microsoft, and all of that, and the speed of change of technology, and the fact that they have to continue to put this investment continually, how will Nigeria cloud providers compete with these so that we can retain business in country?
Thank you, sir. Did you get? Okay, so who is going to add the cloud job?
Yeah, that's a question for you, ma'am.
Yeah.
I think it's a good question in terms of how do we see the local ecosystem partnering or coexisting with the global, given the huge amounts of capital you need to invest in infrastructure and the rapid rate of change of such infrastructure. I think it's always going to be a hybrid model. And I think even the global players are now requiring or realizing that they need to have local components to their solution. I think just as Victor said, some applications need to be domesticated, either based on transaction times or regulatory requirements. So that feeds, I would say, the smaller footprint that we have in country. And when you look at the scale at which cloud, or the hyperscale at which cloud is being deployed globally, perhaps it's a not so bad thing that we're not at that level yet in country. So it's not as if there are hyperscale data centers in country that are not being put to use. What we expect is that both will migrate closer to each other. So some of what is on-prem today will migrate to local data centers, and some of what exists from Nigeria into global data centers will migrate back into Nigeria as we start consuming enough scale. And even without scale, some of the global players like AWS are coming up with solutions such as Outpost that allow deployment of a portion of the solution in country. So we view it as a partnership approach where there's a range from on-prem, there's private locally hosted, and there's public, which might become locally hosted, and there's public hosted offshore. And we believe based on the specific application or opportunity, customers will choose the right platform for their services. Does that answer the question? Thank you.
Can I pitch in with a bit of a sort of like free expo? Yeah.
Okay, sir. Yes, you can do it.
Granted that there are clearly challenges for local cloud service providers and hosted infrastructure providers. Interestingly, the way they meet those challenges is the same way that infrastructure as a service providers around the world do it. It's exactly the same thing. They pay a premium for power, for backup and alternate power systems, for cooling. So it's the same sort of cost structure. Of course, in Nigeria, it's a bit tougher, but there's not that huge variation. So the advantages that a Google or Microsoft might have, if they were to set up the same operation, will be marginal at best. In fact, they're actually better served partnering with the likes of MainOne and so on. So that's just one thing to think about. The other thing is that there are services that can be offered by local infrastructure as a service providers or software as a service providers that complement existing multi-cloud or multi-tenant cloud solutions. I'll just give you one example, which is a burning hot issue right now around security and data integrity, and that's around third-party encryption. The first local data center service operator to provide third-party data encryption seamlessly and on the fly for all cloud data is going to score a huge win with corporate Nigeria, because that's one way that the heads of compliance and the heads of information security and the CISOs and the CIOs and the CEOs around the country are going to sleep better at night, knowing that, okay, my data is in the cloud, I may not know where it is, but even the cloud service provider cannot read that data. Yeah? So the first person to crack that here, and there are providers abroad, doing this sort of thing, but local solutions are always preferred for this, because you might want to integrate it with the on-premises solutions.
Yes.
So Funke, it's a bit of a challenge to you.
Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, can we please put hands together for our panelists? I'm sorry, the lead moderator, thank you so much, sir. Mr. Oyeniran, thank you so much, sir. Can you please be on your feet as we take pictures quickly? Photographers, can we quickly take pictures? Let's appreciate them. I'm sorry, we're just trying to maximize time so we can move straight to the next. Quickly, yes, we can move. Yes. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you from Infoware, the Chief Technical Officer, Mr. Victor, Mr. Niyi Ajao, Mr. Oluwole, Adedayo Adesanya. Thank you so much, everyone. Sir, your swag is too much, sir. Mr. Victor. I won't lie to you, I wasn't here. Let's appreciate them. Thank you so much.